Okay, talk about church growth. One of the easiest things to talk about, and one of the simplest problems to deal with is church growth. And it reminds me of a survey done on what women like in men and men like in women. And they did a survey throughout like 20 countries. And the number one thing they said was what? Men and women. What do you suppose they said? They said they liked the person who was nice. Who was nice. Now, that's number one. Number two, women said a guy who can support me. And number two, what did the guy say? Guy said attractive.
Good looking, yeah.
Good looking. So number two, they diverged that. But number one, they said that the key is for a spouse is a nice person. And you know, the same thing is true in churches. And I'll give you I can give you lots of examples. I go to attend a lot of churches to do presentations, and the pastor often takes me out to lunch, and I'm someone they can talk to without being afraid it's going to get back to the congregation. So they sit down and they complain about people in the church and things that happen. And I can give you a number of cases which illustrate this. But often it's simple things that can be dealt with. So, how do you be nice? Well, number one, when someone comes in the door the first time, the key is you've got to recognize them, and they call it love bombing. You've got to really give them a lot of attention. Now, how do you know? It reminds me of a fellow who did that. If somebody came in and said, "Hi, are you new here?" "No, I've been going to this church for 10 years. And he was just red. Well, it's a big church. He didn't recognize the person. So you need to recognize the person when they come in, that they're new. How do you do that? The best way is give them something big that they got to walk around, and that way you know who's new. It's very simple. And one church, they baked a loaf of bread. And they said, all the new people, raise your hand and we'll give you a loaf of bread, baked bread. So they had someone bake bread. So they gave, when I was there, they had like three people. So they gave all those people a loaf of bread. And then we all knew they were new, and as a result, people lined up to say hi to them. They've done surveys. Sociologists do all this stuff. Done surveys, and they find one of the most important things is the first time you attend, you've got to make them feel welcome. And you need to go up to them and talk to them. Very simple. And when they have that loaf of bread, you can ask them who they are, where they come from, and this is the first time attending, etc. So you know then who is new. And then you can love bomb them. And often, what one church did is they take them out to lunch. And that way they have a chance to talk to them, get to know them, and it helps. And that is one way. Then when they attend once, hopefully twice, hopefully the same thing will be true. Love bombing, 3 times, 4 times, and you've got a new member. And one church I used to go to, I was there about 3 years ago, and they had maybe 200 people. It's a big church. And then I spoke there a year later, and they had probably 600. They tripled in size within a couple of years. And I asked, how did you do it? Well, the pastor is just really a friendly kind of guy. Again, we don't know if they gave him a loaf of bread, but they found out who was new, and they love bombed them. They basically welcome them, good to see you. He takes them out to lunch, gets to know them, and they within, I would say 3 years, they almost tripled. The first time I was there, half the seats were empty. And then a couple years later when I was there, it was packed. The church was packed. And so it works. Why don't we people, members, the pastor, why don't we apply this? I don't know. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me. When I was a Methodist, they were concerned about churches declining. And so what they did is they had us attend Methodist churches to evaluate the church. And we went to one church in Wasion, never forget this, and they love bombed us. we couldn't attend the church. It was, you know, I don't know, 30 miles away or 20 miles away. But on the other hand, we really felt positive about that experience. They were really got to know us. And of course, we didn't tell them we were spies. But we had to fill out a form when we got back. So it works. The second thing is, when they attend, you have to be nice. And I'll give you an example. And the congregation, of course, needs to share this as well. So this example I'm going to give you was a church which was, I would say 300 attended. And they lost half of the people because of one thing. And I'll let you think about what you would do. This was a man who was brain damaged, basically. He was not very tactful. And he was trying to be nice to us in a way that guys shouldn't be nice. And he would say things about the women, oh, you're very attractive today, or I like this necklace or whatever. He was saying things the husband should say to the women. And then when they would, during the church service, he would sit there and stare at them. And it made the women and the men feel uncomfortable. I mean, I can understand them. And they basically said, either he goes or we go. And it was not an easy decision to make because he had a low IQ, he had brain problems. What do you do? And the pastor had worked with him to try to help him realize that you don't do certain things, but he didn't learn very much. So anyways, half left. So what would you have done if you were the pastor? I mean, it wasn't nasty, it wasn't really totally inappropriate. It was the kind of things that the husband should say to his wife, not this 22-year-old kid should be saying about the other women. Comments? What do you think?
They should be educated about mental illness.
Maybe had those who wanted to leave, maybe they should understand. Good boy, you're a good person here.
Yeah.
This is not, as they say, rocket science. It should be pretty obvious, but he didn't think of that. He just said, look, he's attending, and if you leave, tough.
Well,
And so basically about half the church literally left. And have a counselor or a therapist come in and give a presentation and say, look, he's brain damaged, he's not severely damaged, but it was apparent after 10 minutes that he's not all there. And therefore they should have helped him understand that you just kind of have to deal with some of these people. And when he says things are inappropriate, don't reward him, just ignore it the best you can. And that is one way of dealing with it. Another issue that comes up is, and I hope a lot of you find this hard to believe, but the man had a wife, he had a couple kids, and he had a girlfriend in the church. And he didn't see anything wrong with that. I said, look, you're devoted to your wife, but this girlfriend is just, kind of a girlfriend. Well, that's not appropriate. You're married, you have 2 kids. There's a problem here. Okay? And he just didn't see that as being a problem. And when I mentioned this to someone else, they said, maybe pastors need to have sermons on what behavior is appropriate. And if you have a wife and a couple kids, not a good idea to spend too much time with a young girl. There's a problem. Okay? It doesn't look right. And in this case, the wife had a hard time with us. And so maybe more sermons on morality might be helpful. People might realize that indeed some of these things, now it's obvious, it should be obvious to most of us. But on the other hand, it wasn't to this young fellow. Well, he wasn't all that young, I guess, but this man, he wasn't all that obvious. And therefore, he behaved clearly, unequivocally, inappropriate. When you have a wife, you don't have a girlfriend. Period. And again, that's 3rd grade. But on the other hand, and I did ask, has you ever had a sermon on appropriate behavior between males and females in the church? And he says, no, never. And so maybe it's a good idea to give sermons on what behavior is appropriate and what is not appropriate. The scriptures are very clear, for many of these things, and I just did a column in the paper where I asked, what is sin? And I talked about some of these cases where the preacher should talk about what is sin. And again, it's obvious, but on the other hand, it's like my wife has to remind, and you can relate to this, you guys, and you women. My wife has to remind me over and over to do certain things. Am I unusual?
No.
Right? I bet your husband, I assume you have a husband, but you have to remind him over and over not to do certain things or to do certain things. Like in my case, I don't always do the dishes. I don't always clean up the kitchen, and she has to remind me, honey, the dishes aren't done yet. It's your job. Get the dishes done. And so then I come in and I just get distracted. She says, yeah, you got a 6-track mind. I don't know where you're coming from half the time. Well, that's probably true. I'm thinking about papers I'm doing and books I'm writing and so on. So I'm not always aware of things that I should be. So, and that's what, 10 minutes I talked about? But and I've spent some time consulting in a lot of churches and at least talking about these issues, and it seems to be helpful. One more thing I can mention, and that is going out and meeting people in the neighborhood. A lot of pastors don't like to do this. On the other hand, I can say that I began attending a church not too far from me because the pastor came, knocked on my door, and gave me some information about his church. And I went there once or twice, and he loved about me, and I got to know the pastor really well. So going from around the church, a lot of houses around here, knocking on the doors. I attend this church down the street. Here's some information. If you ever need a pastor or a minister or want to go to a church, you're welcome to come. And it's amazing how many people will respond. Yeah, you won't get 80 or 90%, of course, but if you did 20 houses and got one person to attend your church, you can see that if that was done regularly, you would end up with a lot of people attending your church that normally wouldn't. And so getting out in the community, in fact, that church I just talked about that blossomed from 200 to 500 or 600, that's one thing they did, that he was out in the community and he was spending a lot of time getting to know people and inviting them to his church. And he was a likable person, friendly, and people got to know him, and then he had people attend church because of the experience they had with him as a pastor. So sometimes pastors are seen as holier than thou, and when we realize that they like the same things we do, the same football teams, the same sports, when you realize that they're just people like you and I in many ways, then that helps open the door. Any comments on that? Any questions? Or brief, I know, but I had the second part I wanted to go into was why are so many people leaving the churches? We have a mass exodus, and the reason why, I did a whole book on that. Darwinism is the doorway to atheism. And we have found that, indeed, Darwinism is the doorway to atheism. And so atheism has grown enormously in the past 20 years or so. The atheists were maybe, 2-3%? Now they're 3-4 times that. In fact, they're one of the fastest growing belief systems is the atheist. Now, they don't like to call them atheists. It's not a nice word. So they call them other things like secular humanists. Secular humanist basically is an atheist. And again, they don't like to use that word. And Darwin specifically created his belief system in evolution with the goal of murdering God. Made that very clear. He wanted to, he started debating why, but for some reason he had a hard time. It said that when his wife would go to church, his wife was a regular attender to church, Darwin's wife. When she went to church, he would stand outside and curse God. Why? The theory is that he lost his favorite child, Anna, when she was about 12, first daughter. And she died of tuberculosis, I believe. And so therefore, he could not forgive God because of what happened. He was very angry. And you can understand that. But on the other hand, counseling, I think, could have been helpful to help him realize that these things happen, and, you know, we have hope that you see your daughter and that the new heavens and new earth, etc. And so Darwin, what he tried to do then was create an alternative for evolution. Alternative for creation, and that was evolution. Actually, I call it the evolution creation story. And so what kids learn in high school, in college, is the atheist creation story. And that's very attractive to people. When they have something happen in their lives, they accept the atheist creation story because it's presented quite effectively in the schools. I just watched the Neil deGrasse Tyson person, and you've seen him, and he did a good job. I've seen it 3 times now. I enjoyed it every time. Even though he was basically telling you the atheist creation story. He starts out with nothing, and Big Bang, and, well, wait a minute, how did the Big Bang occur? Well, we're working on that. We're trying to answer that question. So you know where he's coming from. It didn't, of course, influence me to become an atheist, but on the other hand, I could see where young people would watch Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is shown in thousands of high schools and colleges. I could see where they would accept the atheist creation story and reject the theistic our creation story. And it's very, I could see why people accept it. And of course, that's what they're going to get in college. We've all had the experience of friends, they go to college and they come back different kids. Right? How many have seen that? And so, if we present, and this gets into my PowerPoint, if we present effectively the fact that evolution could not occur, it did not occur, and the evidence, the scientific evidence, is very, very persuasive that indeed, if you hear it, if you are aware of it, you can see. This PowerPoint, I'll show you parts of it. I use that in a debate with a well-known University of Michigan scientist. And at the end, I asked him, well, how does this affect you? He said, well, it's true what you say, but I still believe in evolution. And I expected that because it's hard to change the way you look at the world. But I think I gave him some ideas which he recognized. And he said, yeah, I don't agree with, or I don't disagree with anything you said. It's right, because his PhD was in genetics. He was a geneticist, and I presented primarily the genetic evidence against evolution. And he recognized, yeah, you're right. But evolution still occurs. Even though the vast majority of genes are deleterious or problematic, he still believed it occurs. Well, you can't change the worldview in someone who, for an hour. It took me years before I recognized the fact that evolution is wrong. You believe it for a long time, even though you are aware of the evidence against it. And that's why it's important for churches to present the evidence against it. Now, the problem with that is probably 90% of the people, or 98%, who attend this church, they're not evolutionists, they're creationists. Okay, and most, they say, why are you talking about this? I'm not an evolutionist, I don't accept that. Why are you wasting time covering evolution? Well, you are spending the time covering evolution for the few young people, like these people right here, the few young people who are influenced, they go to college, they hear the atheist creation story, and they accept it. And so what you have to do is help them understand why it is wrong, and scientifically wrong. And then when they go to college, they are inoculated against that worldview, the evolutionary worldview. And they're not going to be converted. They're not going to be changed. And I've known of people, and you have too, I'm sure, that they go to college and they can sit there and realize the professor's wrong in what he has to say. I'll give you a brief example. I may have to sit down for a second. But this is the book, Monkey to Man, The Evolution of the March of Progress. You've all seen this. And just came out. And here it is. I can open it up so you can see it. Might be in my PowerPoint. Well, here it is. You seen this?
Oh, yeah.
This is all fake. It's all fake. That's what he says. The scientist, a leading scientist, book published by Yale University Press. They're all fake. This never occurred. Now, he still believes in evolution. It's not going to change his belief in evolution, but my question is, if this is all fake, what's the proof? Well, he believes in it. So the fact that it's all fake, well, that's where he's going from. Okay, the creation story in the Bible is very simple. Here it is. So God created man in his own image. In the image God created he him. Male and female he created them. Romans 5:12. Therefore, for by one man sin entered into the world, and death and sin passed upon all men, for all men have sinned. All men basically, of course, inherited this from Adam. Let's see if I get this. There we go. But 30% of those from age 18 to 30, science is the reason they reject the Bible and Christianity. So it's a major reason. They study science and they reject the Bible and Christianity. And so a lot of pastors, that's true, probably don't have degrees in science. That's why people like me are out here. You can bring people in like me, and I can present the evidence, indeed showing that evolution is not true. Okay, Corinthians, well, these scriptures are all, you've all heard. There's evolution. You start with amoeba, we end up with man. And there we go. That's evolution. And there we go. And this is what's taught. And there we go. Even though now this book documents, these are all fake. The whole thing is fake. And there you go, that's fake. But it's very, very persuasive. Boy, that like a picture says 1,000 words. And there you go. And there you go. So creationists have shown irrefutably that Christians who regard the creation stories as myths or allegories undermine the rest of Scripture. You throw out Adam and Eve and you throw out the rest of the Bible. Now that's something a pastor, of course, can cover. Okay? And here is one of many pictures. The problem is, many, but basically what we have to prove evolution is a lot of broken bones, where the stories can be told that are wrong. Less than half of Americans are members of houses of worship. Now this, ironically, probably will change briefly because of the young fellow who was assassinated, Charlie Kirk. I think people realize that if you start killing our adversaries, maybe there's a problem. And he's gotten a lot of attention. Unfortunately, though, I don't think he covers this whole creation issue much at all. That's not his focus. So you can help them become Christians, but are they inoculated so they're not converted to evolution? Okay, I'll move on. Get to this quickly. There's Adam and Eve. And of course, the creation worldview says the first man and woman was right there. Now, one problem you get into constantly is the age of the earth. Almost everywhere I go, people ask about the age of the earth. And a good example is when Adam and Eve were created, they would be, let's say, they'd be 2 days old. You bring a medical doctor in, you do some evaluations, and what would it find? And there's 30 tests they can do, bone density, maturity, etc. And what are they going to find? This man is 22. 22. He has the appearance of age. How else could God create Adam and Eve? What's he going to create? A kidney and then a liver and a bunch of organs and let them sit around for a while and put them together? No, he has to create a fully functioning, living human being. It's the only way he can do it. What about the earth? The earth looks 4.6 billion years old. If evolution is true, it would be 4.6 billion years old. But I believe, as well, Genesis 1 says, God created the earth in one day, and he created it to function as a home for mankind. And that is a new idea for many people. Again, if it evolved, it would be 4.6 billion years old. But if it was created there, and you study the earth, the parts of the earth The only way, like Adam, the only way is you make all the parts and he becomes a living being. You make all the parts for the earth and the earth becomes a home for mankind, but it doesn't until you have all the parts. You compare Earth with all the other planets and none of them are even close. I mean, they're all so hostile. Mars used to think it's close. It's not close at all. It's wholly different from the Earth. The Earth is the only home we know in the universe for mankind. And it had to be created, I feel, in one day to function. Like Adam and Eve had to be created in one day to function. And so when people say, yeah, but they say the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. Well, yeah, if it evolved, it would be 4.6 billion years old. If Adam and Eve evolved from whatever, from an egg, I guess, they would have to be a certain age. Okay, apes as ancestors, what I've done in this book, and I have some in the car if you want to buy one. But what I show is all of the claims of apes as ancestors are all false. They're all false. And that's exactly what this guy did. He did the same thing that I did, except his is only 300 pages and my book is 600. I go into more detail. But he shows that indeed all these missing links are indeed fraudulent or distorted. So science is catching up with us. Now, how do you go from this guy to this guy? Well, there's a profile. You see how different they are. And, of course, facially, we see, look at the difference. Even in a dark alley, you could tell the difference between the gorilla and the young lady, right? And so, obviously, a great difference. Even at the facial level, it's a great difference. And some criticize it and say, yeah, it's a white girl. All right, there's a black girl, brown eyes. Still, huge difference. Huge difference. And there we go. What evolution? What you expect to find? A lot of missing links. What do you find? None. Now you find some people, like microcephaly in this case, that look a little bit like apes, but are not. And so some of the bones they found, in fact a number of the bones they found, are actually of diseased humans, and they kind of look like they're apes. And they claim, therefore, that they are evolution. Okay, again, to see the difference. Now this is, I looked on the internet and tried to find the most ape-like human on the internet. And there are thousands of pictures of men and women on the internet. And this is the closest I found of the thousands of a man that looks like an ape. And still you can see, still different. Even though, of all the men alive, this is the most like an ape ever, probably. And it's clearly different than the actual ape. No question. Only humans can smell. Now, there's hundreds of differences. Only humans can smile. Now, apes can grimace, but they can't smile. The reason is humans have 50 facial muscles, and apes have fewer than 30. So there are hundreds of differences between us and apes. How do you bridge this? The eye is a good example. Apes don't have the whites of the eyes. Humans do. And that's important because when you're teaching, you can tell whether or not the student is looking at you or looking at something else. Okay, the whites of the eyes are important. And apes don't have that. Now what they do is, these are drawings of our missing links, and they draw them with whites of the eyes. Well, they don't know that. They're trying to make it appear that this is all evolving into a human, is what they're trying to do. Okay? And then I gave lots of other examples of what humans can do and where apes can't. So, by the way, this is one fossil. This is one of the most famous, 1470. And there's the fossil in the middle, all put together, and there's, I can't help but laugh, there's all the pieces. And you wonder how they can put all this together. I used to think jigsaw puzzles are hard. This is harder because this is 3D. And all these pieces were put together and they got this. And when you look at other work by other paleontologists, they say, oh, it's not right because, well, it's pieces you have can be moved around. Okay, human and chimp, skull differences, brain size, huge brain size difference. Human, 1378, chimp, 399. So the brain size is enormously different. Only humans can talk, although birds do a pretty good job. But apes don't. They can squeak, make noises, but the whole human area here is designed to be able to speak. Without all these parts, you couldn't speak. Humans couldn't speak. The bones are different. I can get this to work. The jaws are different. The hands are different. And there you can see the feet. Actually, gorillas don't have feet, they have 4 hands. And they have what looks like feet. We call them feet, but these are hands. They're not feet. There's a human foot. See the difference? And 8 foot can climb up trees, human foot, they can't. Different locomotion. And here we go, some claims. There's some pictures of apes. And here you can see what they have now. They have different families. Human family, Australopithecine family, early hominids family. You've got different families. You don't have the progression from apes to humans. And for years, Cro-Magnon was our evolutionary ancestor. Now they recognize, as this picture says, could be your Cro-Magnon, could be you. Cro-Magnon skulls are just like our own. Well, a little different, but in many ways like us. How do they get some of these pictures? Well, if you look at a baby chimp, they're surprisingly human. And Australopithecus could be nothing more than a baby chimp. Because as they grow, the differences become greater. And you can see a baby chimp looks almost human. And an adult chimp. And so what they do is they have skulls which look, well, human, like this, and it's a baby chimp. And there we can see DNA profiles. The ironic factor is that genetically there is a chasm between us and apes. So how you get from apes to us, you have to have mutations. And this is one estimate, there are others, but this is one estimate, there's 15% of 3 billion DNAs differentiate humans and apes, 3%. So we're talking about 450 million differences. How do you bridge this? By mutations. The problem is, and this is the work I did at the medical school, the problem is mutations cause disease. In fact, this book here, Encyclopedia of Human Genetics and Disease, is all about mutations. What are the causes of disease? Well, birth defects, which are actually caused by mutations in most cases. The only other causes besides mutations are pathogens, diet, and toxins. That's it. So most differences, disease causation is mutations. And therefore, cancer, good example, is caused by mutations. And therefore, can they change a chimp into a human? Since the vast majority, and I have a bunch of statistics, the vast majority of mutations are negative. In fact, these are what famous scientists said, Ernst Mayr. Ultimately, all variation is due to mutations. And Theodosius Dobzhansky, mutation is the only source of the raw materials and hence of evolution. So in other words, evolution works by damaging the genes. So you are the result of billions of mistakes. That's really what they teach. So where do we come from? Billions of mistakes. The majority which are harmful. Majority which are harmful. Okay, in the 1920s, Mueller discovered X-rays increase mutation rates by 100 times. And so therefore, he said, if we speed up mutations, we speed up evolution. Now, of course, we look at that today when I worked in the medical school. You look at that today and that's silly. You know full well that mutations are not going to have any benefit, or rarely have benefit. Possibly a few do, but the vast majority don't. And so, in fact, when they give you an X-ray, they cover up your body with lead covers and so on to make sure you aren't exposed to it. Well, Mueller got a Nobel Prize for his discovery, and he concluded we can speed up evolution. That's what he says, speed up evolution by putting us in X-ray machines, turning it on, and getting some good exposure of X-rays. Well, you know that's it. Any nurses in here, doctors, or in the medical area, you know that that's not going to produce better people. And his Nobel lecture, Mueller wrote that basically we now have proved the Darwinian theory. It becomes implemented by our discovery that X-rays cause mutations. Okay, and here, no mutation, no evolution. This is from a textbook. Mutations are random. Okay, and beneficial mutations are rare. This is from a medical textbook, and indeed, it's right. They're rare. So how are we going to get evolution from some primate to you by mutations? You can't do it. It's impossible. And when people claim you can do it, they probably need their head examined. Well, we know they make these claims because that's all they hear. That's all they're aware of. When I watch Neil deGrasse Tyson film, excellent film, his deep voice does a great job. He really does a great job. But he talked about mutations over and over. Get a mutation, we get this. Get some other mutations, we get that. And he never hinted that that's a problem. But he talked in detail about how wonderful mutations are. Well, a problem with mutations are, we know this is P53, a very important gene. In fact, P53 is a major cause of colon and other cancers. And what we find is the mutations are not all throughout the genome, they're in these 4 or 5 areas. That's called hotspots. So what that means is that you'll never get the changes you need to produce a human or anything else because the vast majority of mutations are in hotspots. It can't work. By science, it cannot work. And yet, what do we see? This is from a Scientific American. Here's Java Man, which has been disputed. Here's Piltdown Man, which is a forgery. Here's Neanderthal Man, which are now our relatives. And then there's Cro-Magnons. So the scientists have convinced the world, this is a 1923 article, they have convinced people of evolution by fraudulent pictures. And they know they're wrong. I mention this to people and they say, yeah, but you got to convince them of evolution. Yeah, you distort it, you know, it's a nice picture. It's like when you take a girl on a date, she fixes herself up to look the best. Not really lying to you, she's just putting her best foot forward. So she puts makeup on, lipstick and all that stuff, and she paints her face, and someone says, so she wants to look her best, and we want evolution to look its best. Here you go. So if you object to this, next time you take your wife out, tell her, don't bother, just go out the way you are. Don't bother doing your hair. Don't bother fixing yourself up. Just go out the way you are. You know, I don't want my wife to look fake. I don't want her to be covered up with these makeup and all this stuff to make her look better, just the way she is. Well, that's what evolutionists are doing, they say. And one, which is another PowerPoint, but I point out that the teaching of evolution is very clear, and that's been brought out today by a number of people, that it's racist. Because evolution brings us out from, well, this is from a textbook, gorillas, Negroes, and Negroids, Australoids, Mongolians, and Europeans. So where are we? At the top. Where are the Negroes? At the bottom. In fact, they're right above the gorillas. And so it's very, very racist. This guy in this book, well, he points that out, surprising. And by the way, he quoted me several times very favorably. Said I was ahead of the game, and he points out the guy's a creationist, and he shouldn't be, but he turned out to be right in this area. So it has several quotes. And this is another example. This is from a German textbook. No words, just these are gorillas, chimpanzee, orangutans, and Neger on a tree. What does that say? And you look at that, and that's evolution. And so where are the blacks? Well, they're not up there with the whites. And this is a recent picture from a Life magazine, and you can see the same thing. More tactfully, but pretty much the same thing. Okay, so basically we are indoctrinating students in evolution, which is scientifically not true. Comments? Where am I at in time? Do we have time for some?
You're fine time-wise. We go till 8:30 if needed. So.
8:30, okay, well, I'll go a little bit farther beyond than I expected. So, the courts have ruled, ironically, the courts have said, and there are many cases, there are about 200 cases, the courts have said that by law, you must teach the atheist creation story. You cannot teach the theistic creation story, period. And now, they don't say the atheist creation story, but that's what it is. You have to teach evolution. You cannot criticize it because the courts have said, if you criticize evolution, that means you are teaching backdoor creation. And they claim it's unconstitutional, to teach creation. Can't do it. So in other words, the courts are saying you must indoctrinate students into a worldview which I guess as most of you believe is wrong. And that's indoctrination, that's not teaching. And one of the main things that our friend Charlie got in trouble for was, he has a whole book about indoctrination in our university. That was one of his main focuses. He went to colleges and basically talked a lot about indoctrination. And indeed, I don't know whether he talked about this because I didn't buy the book. It's the cheapest copy was $108.
Really?
And I thought I'll wait until it. You know why they're sold out? It's $108 because people after this, the assassination attempt, people are buying his books and reading them, I hope. So in the long run, I think that, well, in the long run, it appears to me that the guy who wanted to eliminate his ideas are doing the opposite. You know, it's totally backfiring, which as his widow got on there, and I don't know how she could have done that. I don't know. She must have been on some drug or something, so she didn't ball up and lose, because she had 2 days before that she lost her husband and had a little girl, a little boy, and so it was difficult for her to do, but she did a good job and said basically this assassin may have opened up a box that he didn't expect to open. So University of Notre Dame, now certainly they don't teach evolution, atheistic creation story. Well, my grandson wanted to go there, so we went there for a visit, went to the bookstore, and guess what and the library, guess what I found? All the books there were against intelligent design. None of them were in support of our worldview. None of them were. Okay, they were all against our worldview. Well, that's the worldview that's accepted. At Wheaton College, I better be careful here because somebody in here's got a different story, but by and large, I do a lot of presenting in Wheaton, Illinois. I've done that for like 20 years. And boy, they are just really concerned about Wheaton as indoctrinating people in the atheistic creation story. Maybe every professor's not, I don't know, but that's a concern they have. And some of the students there who came to the creation meeting were very aggressive against they saw the harm that Wheaton was doing. And they were very, very upset at this. I'm sure there are some good people at Wheaton. I applied for a job there and they didn't hire me. They hired the guy who recommended me to teach there. Which I thought was interesting. So I've been there several times speaking, so I'm not, probably 3 or 4 times I've been there speaking. So, but I was speaking for a creation group that was there. It was about intelligent design group. So every developing mind wrestles with the mystery of how we came to be who we are. Before Darwin, the only sensible answer was that we were designed by a supernatural creator. And so before Darwin, as far as we know, every intelligent, professional, scientist, botanist, etc. was a creationist. After Darwin, the latest survey I've read, 97% of biologists are atheists now. 97%. And so they indeed have a way that they can present their worldview without problems. I taught at Bowling Green State University for 7 years, and that was quite a few years ago. And all my colleagues, they were older when, of course, when I was hired, I was the youngest professor there. But all the professors that died, everyone except one, had secular funerals. They had a walk in the park. Now, one of them had a church funeral. And that, to me, that's what I knew, that they're all atheists. And that's what we see in the universities. When I taught at the University of Toledo, we had 2 people that I knew of that were creationists. All the rest were atheists. And so surveys have shown that the university faculty, the vast majority are atheists. And that's exactly what Christopher was stressing. Right? That's what he probably said that a lot. And that's why people got so upset. They said it couldn't be true. What is true? He was right. And he was trying to help students understand that they're getting indoctrinated in college. Okay, a scientific understanding of our origins is fundamental to a realistic worldview. We have to understand this worldview. This was a letter I got from Teachers Institute for Evolutionary Science, and they said basically it's hard to teach evolution. So they have this institute where thousands of people have went to help teachers teach or indoctrinate students in evolution. That's the whole purpose. To show them how they can convince students that indeed God didn't create us, but we evolved as a result of the accumulation of mutations. And Jerry Coyne, he's also an atheist, and he had some good things to say in this book. In fact, I'd recommend this book. He said evolution became, in a sense, a scientific religion. This is an evolutionist, Jerry Coyne, saying this. Almost all scientists have accepted, and many are prepared to bend their observations to fit with it, to fit with evolution.
What happens to professors that are creationists?
Well, they stay in the closet. If they come out of the closet like I did, you may have some problems. And I came out of the closet not at the university, but by my publications. In fact, specifically, I wrote a fastback for Phi Delta Kappa, the Honor Society in Education, and I basically presented the creation side favorably, and they went through the roof. You cannot teach students that. And that was a major reason that they let me go. And they were very open. Evolution is fact. We got here by evolution. The myth of creation is wrong. You cannot lead students in the direction of science and teach them myths. They have to get their mind into the real world, and the real world is we evolved from monkeys. That's what they said. They're very clear about that. And then, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Norman Geisler, who headed to endorse several of my books, but he said, you know, how do you believe in evolution when the facts are so against it? How can I sit here and say all you beautiful people are the product of lots of mistakes? I mean, that doesn't flatter you, right? You're all the product of billions of mistakes. That's how you got here. And I mean, people really believe that. Now, they don't put it in that way, but that's what they believe. And we have so many cartoons. There are hundreds. I collect these. And this is Intelligent Design and Creationism. How do you bury it? By science. And in fact, science does not bury creation or intelligent design. In fact, science buries evolution, as I've shown briefly. And I have 60 PowerPoints that show the same thing. And the article in the paper basically said you've got all these useless organs, appendix, tailbone, goosebumps. How do we end up with all these useless body parts? Well, we end up with them because of evolution. And I sent a letter to the little blade and said, all these useless body parts are not useless at all. I have a whole book on that. I think I mentioned here. There you go. I have a whole book on that, useless organs. And I show that indeed these all have uses. So I wrote a letter into the blade and I said they all are useful. I know they got it because they called me and said, did you write this letter? And I said, yes. And do you think they printed my letter?
No.
Nope, didn't print it. They don't want the other side. By the way, my books are in Arabic, and Arabic I'm very popular. And you can see this is by me, but I can't read the Arabic words, but it's indeed, the Arabs are aware of what's going on. And this is the PowerPoint I did. Vestigial organs from 100 to none. And, oh yeah, this is one thing that I mentioned when I wrote the letter to the blade. I mentioned I taught A&P for 3 decades, college level, and I've reviewed lots of books, probably 15 books, for consideration to adopt them. And not one of them even had the word vestigial in the index. None of them claimed any of these organs were vestigial. They all recognized that all these so-called vestigial organs are not vestigial at all. They're all very useful. Okay? And Judge Jones, I think I mentioned him, he claimed that plaintiff scientific experts testified the theory of evolution overwhelmingly is accepted by the scientific community. Okay, that's true. But it in no way conflicts with nor denies existence of a divine creator. Yeah, right. What do you think the purpose is? What do you think the purpose is? So what we're doing is we're trading one religion or worldview for another. And we have the state religion, and the state religion is, as Jerry Coyne said, it's a religion. The state religion we have is a worldview called evolution. Called evolution. So we have a state religion, it's just not one that's favorable to what we believe. And Genesis, of course. And some problems that evolutionists have is Darwin's secret sex problem, and basically, how do you get reproduction by male and female? Reproduction cannot work until the male and female structures are all perfect. You can't, it's not going to occur. You've got to have both of them. And how does that occur? They can't figure it out. Because the female structure may be perfect, but she'll die off with no offspring. Because you don't have the gonads in the male. And it's not going to work. So Darwinism as religion, actually many really acknowledge this. And this is by Michael Roos, and he's basically saying, yeah, Darwin's religion. It's a worldview, it tells us where we come from. So our schools are teaching religion, but not your religion, but their religion. And here I did a survey of people, of groups that accept evolution as being compatible with the faith. Catholics do, United Methodist does, Evangelical Lutheran Church does, African Methodist Episcopal Church does, Presbyterian Church does, Episcopal, Greek Orthodox, United Church of Christ. All of these accept evolution as the means that God created. And it's called theistic evolution. The problem is, theistic evolution is evolution body covered by a thin veneer of theism. Theistic evolution is basically evolution. It's just got some nice makeup on it. It's fooling people. And that's it. So, questions, comments?
Yeah, any questions?
Now, why can't I get this presentation in churches? Almost all the groups I go to are creation groups. I'm preaching to the choir. I bet I didn't convert one single person. You all came in and you accepted the evolutionary worldview. I didn't convert anybody. It would be nice to have an evolutionist come in and say, how you coming? Well, you know, I've got something to think about here.
Well, you've got to reveal it with the major denominations. They're all evolutionary in their worldview themselves. They've compromised already.
And they're all shrinking.
Yeah, well,
They're all shrinking.
you know.
So back to church growth. Teach the truth. And you're not going to lose people. Don't.
I just want to add, you said, we're talking about Charlie Kirk, and true, he wasn't a scientist, but he did have ICR President Dr. Randy
Galusa.
Yeah, on his podcast, and they talked about evolution, and if he was asked, he would say, I'm a creationist, and I'm not a scientist, so I don't have all of the, evidence, but I am, he would say that he was a creationist, and he did, have people that also
Support it, yeah, that's it. It would be nice if he could have some creations that come with him, because probably it's going to be hard for him to deal with these things. I've been in this for 50 years, so I have yet for someone to ask me a question I couldn't answer. I mean, after a while, you heard everything. The main thing is the age of the earth, is the main thing people bring up. And I answer that, I hope, pretty well. Where, when you study the earth, you realize that it's not going to support life until it was the way it is now. And that's what evolutionists have a hard time. They realize that Earth could not support life until it evolved for 2 billion years, and then only then could it support life. So they have to have the Earth evolve. How did the Earth evolve? Well, it just did. But we're still working on that. Now look, Darwin came up with this brilliant theory only 100 and some years ago. It takes us a while to understand all these things, so just give us time. We'll figure them out. It's just, just be patient. We don't have all the answers yet, but we'll have the answers. We're working on it. So we spent, when I watched Neil deGrasse Tyson, we have spent almost $12 billion on our space programs. You know what the number one thing he brought out?
Trying to find aliens.
Trying to find other life.
Yeah.
Because if we find life on Mars or anywhere else, that means life could spontaneously generate, and that means there's no creator. So they're trying to disprove God by finding life on some other planet. And guess what? After spending all these billions, they have found no evidence of life on any other planet. Although they look at one of the moons, Titan's possible. It might be on Titan, or in Celadus, it might be in these other places, but we know it's there somewhere. If it's not in our solar system, it must be somewhere else.
Well, I always think it's funny that, you know, on one hand, they tell you how close we are to the chimpanzees, you know, the apes, right? The genetic 99%. And then on the other hand, they say how far Neanderthal and modern man are. I go, wait a minute. Neanderthals are closer to us. I mean, they're us basically, but you know what I'm saying? They talk out of both sides of their mouth. They don't understand. They don't believe there could be could have been a worldwide flood, but they always say that Mars was totally covered in water. There's not a bit. It's a desert planet.
Well, there's floods there, though. Actually, they can be on Mars, but not on the Earth.
I'm not saying, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like they go back and forth, and they have it one way, and they ricksaw you back and forth. It's like, and they're totally contradictory in their things because they have, as you said, the dominant paradigm. They have the worldview that's the dominant. They get away with being real sloppy, real sloppy.
Yeah, we need to get in the churches, and the major reason we have for the exodus of the churches is, at least in the past, is evolution. It's a doorway to atheism. Kids, and you've probably seen this in your own family. They go away to college, they come back, and you wonder, who are they?
Yeah.
Are these my kids? They've changed, not for the better. Although some, we had 2 kids that went to college and they changed for the better. They went to Southern Methodist University in, I forget, in the South, and they met, my grandson met a Christian girl, and she made it very clear, you want to date with me? This is okay. And he's changed. He never went to church, grew up not going to church. Guess what? They go to church every Sunday. His wife is saying, we're going to church. You got it? Okay, honey, I'm going. No problem. And he likes it. He likes to go to church. So they had a good experience. But that's unusual. Whenever I go out and speak, I invariably get horror stories of what happened. And that is tragic. So other questions, comments? Yeah.
Okay, Jerry.
Pardon?
Why did God create mosquitoes, skunks, porcupines?
Oh, I got a whole chapter. I got a whole book on that. Book over there on that. Yeah. In fact, what I say before I do that presentation is, you better thank God for creating pathogens, because without them you wouldn't be alive. You gotta have them. And there's a lot of information I found since I wrote the book. I need to do a revision of it, but yeah, there is a purpose for all of these critters. And the best example, as I talk about in the book, is bacteria. Boy, you've got to have bacteria. In fact, I've got some health problems, and the doctor said, you need more bacteria. You got the wrong type of bacteria. You need to eat yogurt, other foods like that, because you've got to have a balance of pathogens in your body. You've got to have a lot of good bacteria, and that is very important for good health. And so we need it. It's just some of the mutant bacteria that are problems.
What's the name of the book?
Oh, I forget the name. It's over there.
I'll go get it.
I forget the names of my own book because I come up with the name of the publishers. I don't like that name. They give it a new name.
What was there was a slide, Wonders Without Number with David Reeves. Like, what was, you went through it pretty fast. And so was that a book you wrote?
Oh, he did an interview with me, several. And one of the interviews he did was on vestigial organs.
Oh.
Yeah,
So for his like video series, or?
I'm not sure. Why did God create viruses, bacteria, and other pathogens? Same with viruses. You would be alive if it wasn't for viruses. They're critically important. Got a whole chapter on how important viruses are.